Hello and welcome to the Neuro-Spiritual Awakening Podcast with Dr. Val. This is episode 1 of season 1 of the podcast, and it is my absolute pleasure and privilege to be here with you, finally starting this thing. So to start, I'll say a few words about myself and how I came to be, what I'm all about, what this podcast is about, and we'll get into some behavioral neuroscience stuff because that's who I am ultimately. And we'll end by what you can expect on different episodes of this potty. The first thing first, Dr. Val. I was born in Russia and raised in Montreal. So when I was 10 years of age, my mom and we immigrated to Montreal. I was a single child to a single mom, just to create a little bit of, the kind of childhood that is, or it could be, or it was, what is time anyway. But yeah, fact is fact. I was a single child to single mom who immigrated at the age of 10 to Canada from Russia. And I grew up in Montreal, and a little later, I moved over to Australia to do a PhD. And I completed that PhD. It is in behavioral neuroscience. Particularly, I studied the underlying mechanisms of social behavior, anxiety-related behavior, fear-related behavior. So I'm a behavioral neuroscientist, really, although after the PhD, I went on to complete a postdoc or postdoctoral position where I did research on neurodegenerative conditions such as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, motor neuron disease. So yes, I'm a nerd, and I haven't even told you about the kind of degrees I got prior to that PhD, which are many. I've got a master's in oncology, so cancer research, and a double major in anatomy and anthropology. So it gives you a sense of my, curiosity and interest in the human being. I also spent about 10 years deep diving into the realm of ontology, which is the branch of metaphysics that studies the phenomenon of being, who we be. So really, I'm fascinated with human being, the realm of the mind of the human being, hence I'm a behavioral neuroscientist. And I happen to have undergone what I refer to a neuro-spiritual awakening. Yeah, so I got woke at some point, and I now can see what happened at the level of my nervous system, at the level of my brain, when that happened, and I'll tell you all about it in this podcast. All right. I think that gives you a sense of who I am. Really, I'm also a mom. I've got 2 beautiful boys, and that was, becoming a mom was transformational in and of itself, because I was one of those people that said, hey, I'm never going to have kids. And here we are. Life is a beautiful thing, and it's an unpredictable thing, isn't it? But I love my boys. They're my greatest teachers, and really the joys of my life. And I'm an avid kite surfer. I love kite surfing. It really gives me wings. It's like one of those passions that I followed. And when I came here to do a PhD, I was like, I'm going to do a PhD somewhere where I can kite surf. That's how much I like, that activity. And that has to do with, how much energy I have. And, I'm also a big nerd, or I've got this big obsession with numerology. Yeah, the study of numbers and the energies behind numbers. Pythagoras, the ancient mathematician, philosopher guy, he created numerology. So to me, as a nerdy scientist, it all makes sense, and numbers don't lie. I'm obsessed with them, right? But I've got a lot of 5 energy throughout my birth name. And in numerology, the 5 energies, the travel of movement, the travel of transformation, change, fast-paced kind of stuff. And hey, kite surfing is freedom. Ultimately, 5 energies, the energy of freedom. Yes, my friends, you will get all sorts of goodies in this podcast, including numerology, behavioral neuroscience, and who knows what else. Spirituality, that's for sure, because I'm also an 11-2 life path in numerology, which is the psychic. I've got, claircognizant abilities, clairtangent abilities. If you don't know what that means, it means when I touch something or someone, I can see what has been happening or what has happened to that thing or person. That is right. It's one of my clairs. But before we get into any of that, and I'll definitely elaborate on all of that in this podcast, I want to tell you how I came to be here outside of the academic world, really, although still teach at university. Okay, so I'm not completely out of academia, but I am no longer working in the lab as a neuroscientist like I have been prior to that for over 10 years, where I did all the research that I told you about earlier. Now, what happened was in 2021, I left the academic space because it felt like it was very limited. I feel that the educational system in the way that it is in this world, it is very limited. It's, only caters to one kind of brain. And this is coming from someone who spent a lot of time in the educational system, of course, but it's very limited in terms of what it offers and the kind of brain and person it caters to. Now, in 2021, that really became a problem for me, where I was doing all this amazing research in a lab and I couldn't really get it out there. I couldn't publish the research that I was doing on Parkinson's disease. And I tried and I tried and I spoke to many different people within, many institutions, and I found that there is a certain hierarchy that I just couldn't penetrate. As a researcher, maybe as a female, all of that. And I thought, you know what? I actually don't want to do this. I don't want to do this anymore in the confines and the constraints of how this is done. If I'm a researcher who's doing this valuable research that I want to get out to the public, where the difference gets made, and I can't do that, then, well, I don't want to do this. So I stopped. All right. I stopped being and working in the lab. And that's how Love of Brain, or what I'm currently doing as a freelance neuroscientist, came to be. Love of Brain is my business name. But essentially, the intention of my life presently is to bring the neuroscience out of the lab and to you, to the public, where I believe is its rightful place. Neuroscience is like speaking a language, and I've spent a very long time studying how to speak that language. And, I'm somewhat conversant in it, although neuroscience is a very vast field and behavioral neuroscience is only a small part of it. But look, I'm an expert in the field of behavioral neuroscience. I speak the language, and my mission is really to relay to you what happens at the level of our brain when we engage in certain behaviors, or when we undergo what some people call the ascension process or the awakening process, or something really, really alters, like the world alters for you. You have a massive transformation, nothing's ever the same, that kind of phenomenon. And it's something that I'm really passionate about. And if you're passionate about it, you should definitely reach out to me and we can talk about it on this pod. But that is my mission. My mission is to bring the neuroscience to the people. Another reason I'm doing this is because I got really tired of going from conference to conference, a science conference to the next science conference, to talk to the same people, like the same scientists, about our research and what publications we've got going on, what grants people may be applying to, and, never really getting it out to the public, where, again, I'll reiterate, is, in my view, the place for neuroscience is in the world, not in the lab. Okay, I think I've said that enough. So now let's talk about my awakening process. What happened? So in 2013, when just at the start of my PhD, I came here to Australia, and I'd had certain experiences in life already, and being an 11-2 life path, the psychic, I knew that there were other dimensions, other realms to life other than this 3D reality. And some of you may have an inkling to this, or maybe you're just awakening to this, or maybe you've been there all along. As children, we're very much present to other worlds other than the 3D world, because we're so fresh from the spirit world. Yeah, we just got born into this reality, and it's like, whoa. But over time, of course, our brain does shape our reality. So if we're born into the human condition where everything is materialized, crystallized, very much in 3D, that becomes the go-to neural pathway in our brain to perceive reality. And here we are, my friends. I can't deny that I'm a very 3D-based neuroscience person with awareness and experience and access to other realms other than the 3D. Okay? And I love translating people's work, whatever realm that may be in, into the neuroscience world. So if you're a healer or a teacher or an energy worker and you want your work validated or translated through the lens of neuroscience, we should talk, because I'm your girl. All right. But in 2013, at the start of my PhD, I underwent this awakening process. I was looking to kind of tap into it, and different ways to tap into it. And there's multiple ways you can tap into it, of course. And I can't wait to hear what your awakening process is or was, or what's happening. But for me, it was this inner knowing. And as I said to you before, I am claircognizant, so my intuition's off the charts. The crown chakra, that channel's so wide open. So I was very much like, hey, there's stuff out there. This ain't real. And it happens to be that at the time I was participating in this very nerdy PhD kind of sciencey nerd camp where all these amazing minds and students from all over Australia came together in this workshop, and I met this Brazilian girl. She said to me, listen, you've got to do the journey. You've got to do the ayahuasca journey, and this guy, he's coming, and you should do it in Melbourne. So I was ready for it, right? I'm like, come on, let's do this. Now, I'm not promoting plant medicine or the ayahuasca journey to anyone. I'm literally just telling you what happened for me. It's part of my story. So in 2013, I did this ayahuasca journey, right? And it solidified, it solidified all my kind of inner knowing about this reality and, the limitation of this reality that we live in, because I saw and experienced the interconnectedness of us all, the time frame that the brain perceives time in, which is past, present, and future. And of course, that's not how time works. And I experienced that all of the timelines, time is all happening all at once. It's like it could be 10,000 BC and right now and the future all at once. And of course, as a neuroscientist, I now know that the brain perceives time in a linear fashion as a function of the way that our human brain works. Yeah, not necessarily because time is that way. And in fact, I just told you, I experienced time all happening all at once. And literally I saw the fractile patterns, that connect us all, like they were in people's faces, running through the air, connecting them to other people. So that experience of oneness was very much a reality and very much present for me, and still is to this day. See, the thing about memories is if you pair a memory with an emotion, a strong emotion, what you will get is an enhancement type of effect. You'll be able to remember that memory a lot more vividly. It'll be a lot clearer in your mind than memories that are not paired with strong emotions, okay? Such as is the basis of things like PTSD. Strong emotion paired with a memory causes the reenactment, or, causes that memory to be very much alive. Now, it also is the case with my experience, of course, with the journey, because I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was in 2013. But the reason being is the amygdala, which is the emotional processing center of your brain, it's a very deep-rooted structure, a very evolutionarily conserved structure in our brain. But it sits there and it assesses the world and adds an emotion and the intensity of an emotion to different things, including memories. And memories are formed and stored in the hippocampus. It's not the only place, where memories are formed, stored, consolidated, and all that, but it's a major point. It's a major part of the brain that deals with memory processing. So the hippocampus. And the hippocampus sits right next to the amygdala. They're like little buddies. So no wonder that if you pair a memory with an emotion, the hippocampus sitting right next to the amygdala kind of do their thing, and that memory becomes that much stronger. It does have to do with, hormones like noradrenaline, epinephrine, adrenaline being released at the same time as well, which make the memory even more stronger. But for now, let's just say, if you pair a memory with an emotion, boom, that memory thrives. Okay? You can tell that I'm very passionate, right, about the topic of neuroscience, brain, and all that. Which leads me to another part of my life that I really, really am excited about. And, these are topics that I think should be in our everyday vocabulary. And these things I call and are called neuroplasticity and epigenetics. All right. And one of my aims is to really bring it out there to you, these concepts, these neuroscientific terms or scientific terms, but bottom line, this is happening in all of us all the time. So here we go. Neuroplasticity is the capacity of our brain to change itself based on new experiences. So the brain rewires itself. You've heard this before. You may have read the book or multiple books on this, but it's one of the wonders and the amazing capacities of us as human beings that we're never stuck with who we are or our experience of life, because our brain alters itself based on new experience. So every day, every moment, every second, your brain can alter itself, it can rewire itself, and that is ultimately the basis of things like transformation. I'm no longer the same person that I was yesterday or the day before. Or things like manifestation. Hey, I'm manifesting all these great things. Yes, because it's based on you rewiring your brain to perceive all these amazing new things that you're quote unquote manifesting. In fact, you're manifesting all the time. You're manifesting the good, the bad, the ugly. But, neuroplasticity is at the source of it all. So I just can't wait to keep jamming about it with you, because it's a hot topic, but it's also a topic of my interest, and it is a leverage point in the world of the human brain. Another thing that I'm very passionate about is epigenetics. I know it could be a mouthful, but ultimately epigenetics is the phenomenon of how our DNA expresses itself based on the environment that we're in. So, said in other words, we've got our genetic code that we inherit from our parents, they inherit from their parents, and so on and so forth. So when I say your ancestors are with you, they're literally with you in your genetic code. Now, how genes get expressed, though, is very much dependent on the environment that the person is in. So you can, you've heard about this before, like you place someone in a dysfunctional environment, that's not going to be very good for that person. Or if you place yourself or someone in an empowering environment, and when I say environment, I mean physical, social, economical, all of that, A positive environment will have a major impact on a person, on a human being's life, at the level of their DNA. You place a person or yourself in a stressful environment, you got DNA expression of cortisol, the stress hormone, whereas not so much of serotonin, the happy molecule, or oxytocin, the social bonding molecule, or the love hormone. Things like that. Again, we'll delve into this much, much more, but I did want to voice it and express that epigenetics is also something that I'm very passionate about. And ultimately, I think these two are really superpowers. The capacity of us to alter our brain moment by moment, and the capacity for us to alter our DNA expression with environment is very powerful, because we have a choice about the environment that we're in. And we have a choice about the new experiences in our life. So in that sense, we're very much in the driver's seat of our life, if you will. And I like being there. Of course, studying ontology and the principles of being, I also have examined and experienced myself and the kind of, human being that I am. And I've noticed that for a large part of my life, I've been driven by this kind of willpower, in a very masculine template, if you will. It's a thing, like a go-getter, I'm going to get it done, I'm going to produce the results, like that kind of thing, right? Whereas something's really shifted lately, this year in particularly, I'm much more in this kind of feminine energy, if you will, an energy of flow and receiving rather than making shit happen. And, funnily enough, shit still happens, but it happens with flow and grace and ease. And that's an ongoing discovery, which I'm sure I'll share with you as we progress through this podcast. One other thing that I am a big advocate for is your social environment and the impact of, our social connections, social ties on our life. If you're new to the world, in 2020, we had COVID happen, a pandemic, which caused the isolation or the social isolation of many of us within our homes or dwellings or, wherever you lived, you kind of had to stay there isolated away from people for the most part, or at least I've experienced that. And if this resonates with you, well, then listen up. Social isolation is one of the worst things that you can do for your brain. I know, because what happens is when you socially isolate a human being, and us being naturally social creatures, social animals, if you will, what happens to our brain is that the prefrontal cortex, the CEO of our brain, the part that regulates our emotions, that makes decisions, that, is partly responsible for our personality. The prefrontal cortex gets disconnected from other parts of your brain, such as the amygdala. So when the prefrontal cortex is not regulating the amygdala or your emotions run wild. And when your emotions run wild, you're not so good at, making decisions and properly thinking. You're essentially in survival mode. So yes, more on that too, but social environment, social interaction, vital, vital, vital. So, if you're sitting there and you're like, wow, I really need to reach out to a friend, please do that now. Do your brain some good, and you don't necessarily even need to talk to people. I'm not talking about social interaction like talking. You could sit next to someone, you could hug them, All right. What else can I tell you? Oh, well, what can you expect? What can you expect on this podcast? So I think you get a flavor for what you can expect from me, which is a mixture of neuroscience, behavioral neuroscience, stuff about the brain, also spirituality, other dimensions, psychic senses, a tad of numerology, or maybe a lot, depending on the episode and who we have on here. And which brings me to say I'm really, really, really excited for the kind of people that are going to join us on this podcast. I've got a lineup of incredible, incredible guests. And listen, if you're listening to this and you're like, I want to come on this podcast, please reach out to me, because together we're really going to explore. We're going to explore the experiences that different people have, which I think is the beauty of life. You can't have all the experiences that a human being has. So if we can live through other people, which is what we're going to do on the podcast, is going to be very monumental in your experience of life, because people are going to share with us their experience, their expertise, their passions, and of course, we're going to look at it through the lens of neuroscience and neurospiritual awakening. We're going to listen to people's awakening processes, what happened, what's happening, kind of like that. Now, if you're into this, please subscribe to this podcast so you can get updates on what's happening. You can also follow me on Instagram at love_of_brain, love of brain, or visit my website at www.drvalrytova.com. I'll put all this stuff in the show notes, but it's been my absolute pleasure and privilege being here with you and launching this thing, and I cannot wait for episode 2. Peace and love to you all. I'll see you next time.